The medical school application process is an extremely long and drawn-out ordeal. From the time you request your first rec letter to the time you finish your last interview and select which med school you're committing to attend, a full year or longer will have passed. It's no wonder some students start to lose momentum along the way. The essay writing process is an especially notorious stumbling block to otherwise highly motivated students. It requires an immense amount of effort, yet the turnaround from when applications open to the time when essays should ideally be submitted is just a matter of weeks. In this video, I'm going to give you a tried and true month-by-month timeline for the medical school essay writing process that will maximize your writing potential, prevent burnout, and keep on track to submit strong essays as early as possible. Before we get into the monthly breakdown, it's important to stress that my recommendations assume ideal conditions. If you're in the midst of MCAT prep and will be taking it sometime between January and March, you may hold off on drafting your primary application essays until after your exam. Also, if you come across my recommendations for January and February in, say, April of your application year, don't fret. Just make sure to work a bit more quickly to catch up. And if you're ahead of my recommended schedule, that's awesome. What's most important is that you take away a clearer understanding of what all you'll have to write and strategies for developing a cohesive application narrative. Let's start with January of the year you'll be applying to medical school. During January and February of your application year, you should brainstorm and outline your personal statement essay. Don't wait for inspiration to strike you. At this stage, you don't need to have a polished draft yet, but giving yourself time to dig through the bad ideas to uncover the good ones will take some of the pressure off and make it less stressful when it's time to get the final draft ready. You can kickstart the brainstorming and outlining process by using some of these exercises and by checking out our personal statement premium example library, which includes hundreds of exclusive sample essays. Exercise 1 is word webbing. Word webs can be useful at any point in the brainstorming process, but I find them especially helpful in figuring out which personal qualities you want to convey through your essay. You might also think of your personal qualities as your character traits. If your life was a book and you were writing a character analysis about yourself, what are the character traits, values, and personality quirks that you definitely mention? To begin your word web, draw 3 to 5 medium-sized circles on a piece of paper, spaced far apart. Then, write down one of your personal qualities in each circle. Next, draw a few lines radiating from each circle. At the end of each line, draw a circle, leaving enough space to write down a personal experience that demonstrates these qualities in you. For example, if you wrote compassionate in one of the initial circles, the circles connected to it might read, I stayed home from a weekend road trip with friends to take care of my sick cat. And I asked each kid in the pediatric cancer ward what their favorite song was and learned to play each of them on my ukulele. And I spent many of my lunch breaks as a hospital volunteer hanging out with the patients that I knew didn't have any family nearby. Or if one of your initial circles says good-humored, the connected circles might read, I cheered up my roommates by doing celebrity impressions as we soaked up all the water from a burst pipe in our dorm. And when a pediatric patient asked me why I talk funny, referring to my accent, I told him it's because I didn't eat enough vegetables when I was his age, before gently explaining the concept of different languages and accents. And when I tutor underclassmen in chemistry, we write catchy rhyming songs together to help them memorize key concepts and formula. And let's say you wrote adaptable in your third initial circle. Then your connected circles could read something like, I spent the past 3 summers gaining overseas clinical experience, and I taught myself conversational Swahili, French, and Portuguese so I could better communicate with patients and clinical staff. Over time, I've learned how to match my tone and communication style with each individual patient to help make them comfortable. When all 4 of my shadowing opportunities fell through at the last minute, I started from scratch with cold calling doctors, and I took an online class about innovations in neurosurgery in the meantime. When you finish filling out your word webs, take a moment to review all the new ideas you've generated. Not all of them will make it into your personal statement, but some may also be great material for secondaries. Notice how these examples do not all need to be directly related to medicine and healthcare. Sometimes referring to 1 or 2 experiences that demonstrate how your key qualities extend beyond your actions in the classroom, hospital, or lab can actually work in your favor because it shows that you're actually working to embody those qualities in your everyday life, not just when you're racking up volunteer hours for your resume. Exercise 2 is the imaginary interview. The best personal statement essays tell a compelling story or related stories from your life rather than just listing random experiences and loosely linking them together. In this exercise, you're going to work on your storytelling skills. First, review your results from exercise 1. Highlight a few of the experiences that you wrote down to illustrate your best personal qualities. Next, imagine you're a celebrity who's been invited to a late-night talk show. For each of the experiences you highlighted, write down 3 to 5 questions that you'd like the imaginary talk show host to ask you. These questions should explore what happened during the experience, how you felt, what you learned or accomplished, how it influenced you or specific people around you, and how it factored into your decision to pursue a career in medicine. Write the questions on a piece of paper, but don't spend time writing down your responses. Instead, using the voice recording app on your phone, press record and take as much time as you need to answer the questions aloud. Imagine you're actually speaking with a real person and have fun with it. Don't feel the need to sound overly academic or professional at this point. Be yourself, joke around, and take a moment to pause and consider your response. Remember, this is late night TV, not a job interview. Once you finish the recording, listen to it and take notes on the details you included in your answers. If you really don't like listening to the sound of your recorded voice, you can just write down your responses instead. But many people tend to speak more freely and naturally than they write, especially if no one else is listening. Exercise 3 is free writing. In this stage of the writing process, the most important thing is overcoming your fear of the blank page. Set a timer for 15 minutes and respond to the AMCAS or AMCAS personal statement prompt. Use your work from the first 2 writing exercises to generate some ideas, but don't overthink it. Write whatever comes to mind. It's okay if it doesn't make sense. Don't even worry about forming complete sentences or using proper punctuation. Try your best not to self-censor. That is, if your brain tries to tell you, "That's a stupid idea," just before you go to write something down, write it down anyway. Some of the best essay topics start out this way. The harder you are on yourself for not being able to come up with a good essay topic, the longer it will take for you to have your light bulb moment. Once your 15 minutes are up, skim over what you've written and underline anything that jumps out to you as interesting, funny, unusual, or particularly personal. It's usually a good idea to repeat this exercise 2 or 3 times a day until you've generated a few ideas that you'd like to develop further. If you keep coming back to the same ideas during your free writing exercise, that might be a sign that we've hit on the topic you should write about. By March 15th, having already laid the groundwork with your brainstorming exercises, write your first personal statement draft. Keep in mind that you may need to write 2 different versions of your essay if you're applying to MD and DO programs. The earlier you complete your first draft, the better, but aim to complete it no later than March 30th. I strongly recommend budgeting out a few days to step away from the completed first draft, let it breathe, and then come back to it before working on subsequent drafts. From March 15th to April 30th, continue writing new drafts of your personal statement essay. Revise and polish your essay carefully using some of the following expert strategies. Aim to have a final polished draft of your personal statement and your work and activities section ready for submission by April 30th. First, check your essay for the 8 most common medical school personal statement mistakes that I outlined in our video on that topic. Second, don't be afraid to tear your essay apart and put it back together, possibly several times. You can save your original drafts in a separate document so you don't lose any material during the revision process, but don't be afraid to erase, rearrange, and rewrite entire sections in the early stages of revision. Third, check for common grammatical errors as well as repetitive sentence structure and paragraphs that begin with the same word or phrase. Additionally, make sure that each paragraph flows well into the next using strong transitions. Fourth, ask 1 or 2 people to read your essay and provide feedback, but don't get too many eyes on your essay. A trusted mentor who has experience guiding students with the med school admissions process is best. If you invite too many opinions in, you may end up with a lot of subjective, contradictory advice, especially if some of your readers don't know much about what specifically makes a strong medical admissions essay. Fifth, ask yourself the following questions. Does the chronology of the essay make sense, or will it be hard for adcoms to figure out the exact sequence of events? Have I fully and clearly answered the prompt? Do my personality, voice, and personal qualities, the ones selected during the word webbing brainstorming exercise, clearly shine through? Does my conclusion provide new details or perspective rather than just summarize the body of the essay? And sixth, each time you finish a draft, but especially the final draft, read it aloud to check for typos, grammatical errors, and awkward phrasing you may have overlooked. During May of your application year, you should aim to submit your AMCAS, ACOMAS, and/or TMD SAS primary application, which includes your personal statement and your activities section. These activities sections are relatively similar across all three applications, but they're called Work and Activities in AMCAS, Experiences and Achievements in ACOMAS, and Personal Biography and Activities in TMD SAS. There will often be a lot of overlap between the experiences listed in the activities section and the experiences mentioned in your essays. This isn't a bad thing, but if your essays are like a feature film, then the activities section is like a movie trailer. Whereas you'll be constructing a detailed narrative in your essays, you'll be listing concise summaries of specific experiences and achievements in the activities section. Keep in mind that your space will be quite limited in the activities section. For example, AMCAS only allows you 700 characters, including spaces, for each of the 15 experiences you list, though you can choose 3 as most meaningful to expand upon with an additional 1,325 characters each. The earlier you complete your primary application, the better, because you will not get access to your secondary applications until you've submitted your primary application along with your transcripts and allowed time for it to get verified. If you submit your primary application by late May, it may take less than a week to get it verified. But if you wait until late June to submit your primary application, by then AMCAS administrators will be dealing with a massive quantity of applications, so it could take up to several weeks just to get access to your secondary applications. So, to summarize, the earlier your primary application is verified, the earlier you can receive your secondary applications, the earlier you can submit your secondary essays, and the earlier medical schools will actually start looking at your application and offering you interviews for a very limited number of seats. Also, a quick side note before we continue. If you're applying to MD-PhD programs, you'll be asked to submit 2 additional essays. One about why you want to attend an MD-PhD program, and the other about your significant research experiences. Those essays are outside the scope of this video, but we have separate resources for them. On top of that, TMD SAS also requires 2 additional essays, a personal characteristics essay and an optional essay. We have a separate resource on that too. All right, let's now turn our attention to what you should focus on between finalizing your primary application materials and waiting to receive your secondary applications. Think of this period as the calm before the storm. Take a few days to recover from the primary application phase and then get back to work. Review secondary prompts from the previous year and set aside at least an hour or 2 each day to brainstorm your potential topics and pre-write your essays. Laying this groundwork is essential to preventing burnout once you start getting flooded with secondary applications. One skill you can also practice even before receiving your secondary applications is how to repurpose an essay. It's advisable to adapt previously written essays when appropriate, as most fall into one of 6 categories: the diversity essay, the adversity essay, the why us essay, the gap year essay, the leadership essay, and the additional information essay. Once you've written a strong essay for one school, there's nothing wrong with sorting each of those other schools' prompts which fall into the same category and then tailoring that initial essay to demonstrate fit with each of the other schools. Keep an eye out for our upcoming video on how to efficiently repurpose your secondary essays, as well as our secondary series, where I'll show you how to sort your secondary prompts into these 6 categories and construct impactful responses for each. And if you're looking for more inspiration on how to write consistently strong essays, our secondary essay premium example hub contains over 1,000 example essays, one for every single prompt required by medical schools in the US and Canada. All right, around the very end of June or the start of July, assuming your primary application is verified by then, the schools to which you're applying will send you secondary applications. Here's where the pace really picks up. Think of the next 4 to 6 weeks as a sprint in the middle of a marathon. You should plan to submit your secondary application in July if possible, and certainly by the end of August. The earlier the better, as interviews will already be underway for some medical schools by August. In addition to submitting your primary application early, it's also extremely important that you submit your secondary applications as early as possible without compromising the quality of your essays. To be clear, if you submit your primary app early but then submit your secondary app later, say around the end of August, AMCAS likely won't look at your app until after they've already started interviewing other candidates for the very limited number of spots. That said, don't rush to crank out as many essays as quickly as possible just so you can submit them before everyone else. If an essay has been hastily thrown together, there's no hiding it from AMCAS. This is why pre-writing during the period of time while you're waiting to gain access to your secondary applications is really key. You may have heard that it's ideal to submit your secondaries within 2 weeks after receiving your application. However, that 2-week guideline isn't a magic number. If a school explicitly asks for a secondary application within 2 weeks of receipt, you should meet their expectation. Other schools don't have a hard and fast turnaround rule. As soon as you're confident that you've produced your best secondary essays, revise them one final time and then submit. Don't spend precious weeks fretting over trivial questions of word choice. If you've put in the time and effort, be confident in the quality of your essays. To conclude, the medical school application process can exert a ton of pressure on applicants, and even the most promising students are at risk of getting overwhelmed, losing their direction, wasting precious time, and submitting sloppy, mediocre essays too early or strong, well-written essays too late. Don't let your years of hard work go to waste just because you couldn't budget your time or you were too hard on yourself and ended up falling behind at this point in your med school trajectory. You've made it this far. You absolutely have what it takes to finish strong. Beginning the writing process in January for essays that won't be due until midsummer may seem like overkill, but trust me on this one, your future self will be grateful. Stick to this timeline and you'll be right on track to submit essays that demonstrate your greatest potential. And whether you've already got your essays drafted, you're in the brainstorming stage, or you're still just thinking about the brainstorming phase, be sure to check out our personal statement premium example library and our secondary essay example hub for full-length sample essays for every medical school in the US and Canada. Happy writing.